overlay. Ms. Lidy.
Good afternoon. My name is Bridget Lidy. I'm Director of Planning and Urban Design with the City of Savannah. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. I'm here to talk about the hotel development study. So over the last couple months, more like 2 years, we've been working on this particular project with the neighborhood representatives as well as with stakeholders. And we're pleased to report to you today that we have gone through that process and we have come up with some recommendations on how to move forward. And what I would like to say is that today, I'm just here presenting this information to you. The goal is to come back to you with a formal presentation to secure a recommendation where the options that we're presenting would be considered by council along with the recommendation. So this is just a backdrop to give you more information and provide some discussion as we move forward with the process. So we do have a current hotel overlay district that is in our ordinance. It was created back in 2018, and it specifically applies to the Savannah Historic District. And it distinguishes the different types of hotels that we have as far as the sizes go. So we have large hotels with this overlay, which is 75 rooms or higher. And then we have small hotels, which are 16 rooms to 74 rooms. So it distinguishes the size of the hotels. And they're only allowed in certain areas and they have to front certain streets. And so the image that you see here is actually what is in the ordinance, with the pink representing no hotels, the yellow representing small hotels to be permitted as long as they're on those streets that are highlighted in red. And then the green area where hotels are permitted, once again, that the hotels have to front those streets that are highlighted in red. Since the inception of this ordinance, there have been 2 changes to it. The first was a text amendment to allow for the Manger Hotel, which was previously a hotel, to be reestablished as a hotel, so there were changes associated with that. In addition to that, there was an addition to the map to allow a property on Cohen Street to become a part of the overlay. And so 2 changes since the inception, which was back in 2018. So when we look at the ordinance, we have the text amendment, but we also have the principal use table. With the principal use table, you can see here where hotels, both the small size and the large size, are permitted, and in which zoning districts. Within the context of the current hotel overlay, you can see with the downtown districts where they are permitted and where they are permitted by a special right. And what I would say is the use standards, which is on the far right side, is highlighted as 713. That pertains specifically to the hotel overlay for the downtown historic district. And so what transpired, and you all might remember a couple years ago, we had the neighborhoods coming to you, which included Victorian, Streetcar, and the Cuyler-Brownville neighborhood, to petition to prohibit hotels in their neighborhoods. And with that, it would be, they proposed to extend the hotel overlay into their communities, and that's what you see on this map here. And the main reasons why they were looking at doing this was to provide the items listed here, negative impact to neighborhood quality of life, which are associated with hotels and their perspective. Also to help maintain affordability within their community for residential homes, encourage infill, multifamily and residential housing, and provide a more rigorous public review process for this type of use. What I will also say is that in reviewing their comments, they also wanted something that the development community always advocates for, and that's predictability. They want to know whether or not there's going to be a hotel on the vacant lot around the corner from where they live. And then they also want to maintain the fabric of the community and not have that change. So with that, the petition was presented to you all, and ultimately what happened is there was a letter that was sent to the city of Savannah and to you all here from the Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Business Association, the Savannah Economic Development Authority, as well as the Tourism Leadership Council, specifically requesting a timeout before moving forward with the petition to allow for additional engagement for the process. And what I will tell you before is when they, prior to the adoption of the 2018 Hotel Overlay District, there was a great deal of dialogue with both the residents and the Downtown Neighborhood Association as well as the tourism industry in reference to coming up with the final recommendations which were adopted as part of our zoning ordinance. So this is just a brief outline of where we were and what we have done over the last 2 years with this particular project. And what we were looking at specifically with the 3 neighborhoods, and when we honed in on where hotels could potentially be developed in the areas, it's primarily in the TC1 and the TC2 zoning districts, with the caveat that it's a special use permit, meaning that it comes to you all, and then once it comes to you, it goes on to Mayor and Council for ultimate consideration. Within the context of these 3 neighborhoods, only smaller hotels, so those that are 16 rooms to 74 rooms, have that provision. Large hotels are not permitted. One interesting feature about that is with the special use qualification that the use has, the requirement that the use has, is that typically we refer to Article 8, which has limited and special use zoning use standards. And with this particular use, we have no standards. So when you go to 8436 in the zoning ordinance, the only thing that's there is reserved. So there are no standards for the special use for hotels. When you look at the hotel development standards, they have to follow the exact standards that are in the ordinance regarding development standards. So that's the setbacks, the footprint, all of those different aspects of development standards. They also have to follow the general site standards. And with the TC zoning districts, just to let you know, the TC1 has a maximum footprint of 5,000 square feet, and the TC2 zoning district has a maximum footprint of 10,000 square feet. And the maximum height for TC, both zoning districts, is 3 stories at 45 feet. Within the general site standards, within the Victorian and streetcar district, there are parking standards. The typical parking standard for a hotel is 1 parking space for each room. But within the context of our zoning ordinance, we have a reduction in Victorian and streetcar district at 25% for that parking standard. And there are also other standards there that allow for alternative parking arrangements such as valet parking, shared parking, etc. Within the context of any development, they would also have to comply with the development standards that are within historic overlay districts. So when we went through this process, we looked at revising the hotel size definition, and you can see here when we were kind of playing around with the principal use table, how we added hotel motel at a smaller size from 16 to 40 rooms, kind of a boutique style hotel. And then we also looked at, taking it from 41 rooms to 74 rooms, kind of like a mid-size hotel. And with that, moving forward and looking at this, it created a lot of dialogue, specifically looking at adding additional use standards, which I'll get to in a moment. So when we looked at the zoning districts, we identified the TC zoned districts, and you can see on your presentation here, where the pink is obviously no hotels, but where the blue is would be those TC zoning districts. So similar to the provisions that are in the ordinance for the hotel overlay in the downtown area, we looked at the streets that had a lot of traffic on them, those arterial streets, and also overlaid that with the TC1 and TC2 zoning districts, which is typically where the zoning is located, and looked at different scenarios of where hotels could potentially be located in that smaller threshold of under 40 rooms. And we looked at Bull Street, Henry and Anderson, MLK and Montgomery as one scenario, and then all the way through going back to MLK, Montgomery, Henry and Anderson. And so you can kind of see the different options and scenarios that we considered as we went through this process. And when we got together with their stakeholders, we talked about that. They were very much in favor of looking at that smaller hotel size for options, and then looking at those designated corridors for potential fit, and then also looking at amending the commercial use standards. And so when we talked about amending the use standards, saying that, hey, the hotel has to front an arterial street, you have to have on staff 24/7, 7 days a week, which typically with a hotel, that's a requirement that is required. The screening and buffering has to be honored and complied with. There will be no reductions or no variances to that. Design standards for mechanical equipment and refuse is required. Once again, no reductions. If there was an outdoor pool, it would only be accessible with hotel guests, and the building footprint could not exceed that minimum requirement or the maximum that was allowed. Similar to what I mentioned to you all before, the TC1 at 5,000 square feet and the TC2 at 10,000 square feet. So the neighborhoods were very active with this process. I have to give them a lot of credit for moving forward. We worked with them and they came up with a fantastic survey that they did with over 700 responses for the 3 different neighborhoods, and they all worked together, which makes things a lot easier when you're working with different neighborhoods. But out of that 700 plus response rate, about 56% represented the actual people living in the neighborhoods. So from that, what we gleaned from the survey was that about, for the Thomas Square neighborhood, about 64% of the residents in that neighborhood were not in favor of any hotel. And as it went through to the Victorian district, that increased to 74%, and then for Cuyler-Brownville, that increased to 90%. And then looking at the options of the different corridors and where corridors could potentially support the different small use hotels. When we looked at Bull Street, the response rate came back as 68% were not in favor of any on Bull Street. Henry and Anderson, 70% of the people were not in favor of that, and 62% were not in favor with that for MLK and Montgomery. So when we take the neighborhood results, we looked at the opposition and what they were truly saying, and it was similar to what I was talking about before. And then the people who were actually supporting it were talking about economic benefits and revitalization, as well as enhanced services and amenities. But going back to the opposition, it really verified what the neighborhood was talking about before in reference to wanting more predictability, making sure that the character of their community would not be changing. So as we sat down with the stakeholders after that survey, we kind of got into the weeds and said, where do you all want to go with this based on the survey results and what we currently have in front of us with the work that we've been done. The neighborhood continually advocated for no hotels within the 3 neighborhoods, period. And talking with the hotel industry, they were at the table, and they were saying, hey, we're in favor of looking at the smaller size hotel, up to 40 rooms, as I mentioned earlier, looking at designated locations for those hotels that are more on commercial corridors, and then looking for amendments to the special use permitting process to ensure that the neighborhood character will be protected. And so as we moved through the process, we continued to flesh out those items. Our stakeholders discussions came through at one meeting. A member of the tourism industry came through and suggested an area because the neighborhood was saying, hey, we prohibit the hotels anywhere in our community. And the representative came through and said, hey, what about Henry and Anderson, solely facing those 2 streets between Whitaker and Drayton? And that was not something that was palatable to the neighborhoods, particularly the Victorian district, which is where it would be impacted. And that's the block that has the Sears building, as well as the AT&T Bell South building, and a few churches and SCAD is located on there, around that area. So what did we come up with? We came up with 3 different options. The first option was to have the hotel overlay district expand into these neighborhoods, but allow it in the TC1 and TC2 zoning districts. And with that, you'll see the map that is in front of you, and those are the parcels that it would impact. Option 2 would be that example that I just gave you, prohibit it, but allow it in this particular area on Henry and Anderson, between Whitaker and Drayton. And then the third option is an outright prohibition across the board for hotels within the context of the 3 neighborhoods. With that being said, as part of the recommendations, we would look at adding special use conditions to that section 8.436 to ensure that whatever happens moving forward within the TC zoning districts, these standards will be in place. The room size wouldn't be more than 40. Such development would be part of a mixed-use development, 24/7 operations would be on site. The screening and buffering I mentioned before. And then another item that's on there is for the pool usage, making sure that there's an affidavit that any outdoor pool proposed as part of the hotel development should be accessed by only hotel guests. And then the building footprint of the proposed hotel development may not exceed the minimum allowed by the development standards for those permitted uses. So that's that 5,000, 10,000 square feet based on the different zoning districts. In addition to that, making a recommendation and revision to the principal use table to add that section, which has the special use conditions listed. So that is our report. As I mentioned, this is the presentation where we're giving it to you for discussion and consideration. We'll be coming back formally to present this as a text amendment and a map amendment. And then whatever your recommendation is will be forwarded on to Mayor and Council for further consideration. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Go ahead, Mr. Mulder.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Bridget and city and MPC staff for working on this item, to thank our 3 neighborhood associations for bringing these petitions forward, and for helping us and staff and all the stakeholders involved get these recommendations down to kind of brass tacks and sharpen pencils on what would be a permissive use of hotels, what would be a restricted use of hotels, and what would be a prohibited use of hotels in these 3 neighborhood districts. And I think that's exactly what this process has yielded, has sharpened the pencils and gotten down to the specifics about those 3 options. And I know that we look forward to this body's recommendations on how to move forward in the conversation on behalf of. I wanted to thank the neighborhoods and the city and NPC for moving this. This is really difficult work, and we're moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Go ahead, Mr. Stevens.
No, I appreciate seeing this effort and for the going on it, because this has been a concern for all of those named communities for a while. So I appreciate seeing it. It looks like it's a very thoughtful process.
I too thank you very much for pulling this information together.
You have heard a lot of cats.
Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Warwick.
Has there been a deluge of requests to build hotels in this area?
We have not received any requests for hotels in these 3 areas at this time.
All right, any other comments? Mr. Notrika?
So Bridget, we've got 3 starkly different options. The first one seems actually probably the most fair and balanced of the 3. Do you have any other insights into that versus the other 2?
I don't. What I will tell you is just a little bit of history with the TC zoning district. Within the context of the TC2 zoning district, hotels were permitted as small hotels when the streetcar overlay was approved.
And inns are still permitted, aren't
Partly,
they?
yes, ma'am, they still are. And so with that, during the deliberations of NUZO, the TC1 zoning district was added for hotels. But once again, it was listed as a special use, but no special use standards were ever developed. And I think that's kind of a critical thing you mentioned, that number 1 seems like a fair and balanced approach. It is, because we need to make sure, if it is, that we've got those special use standards in place.
So let me see if I understand that. So if the overlay gets enacted, it still won't affect the, end provision or will it prohibit?
It will not, this is solely for the use of hotels.
So inns 15 rooms and less will still be allowed?
Correct, as is, nothing's gonna change with that.
Thank you.
And what I would say, it might be that, as you all deliberate on this, that maybe it's a hybrid, maybe there's a recommendation number 4 that comes out of this, as another scenario. But definitely 3 different options. The neighborhoods I know are very passionate, which is understandable about what they want to protect. And I also know that the industry is also out there, promoting their efforts. So it's gonna be a delicate balancing act. But I think we have 3 options, and there might be another hybrid that comes out for deliberations.
One concern I do have is the Henry Street, Anderson Street, area. Putting hotels on there, I think would generate problems with traffic, people not knowing about the one-way streets, and I see some confusion with traffic in that one, but.
Good one. Right.
Anything else? Thank you very much. I think we're done with business. Do I have a motion to adjourn?